In this first special episode of Salvation and Catastrophe, I look at the apple of discord at the core of the Greek-Turkish War, the state of the Ottoman Greek, also called in Turkish Rum community, in 1918. Here, on Salvation and Catastrophe, the Greek-Turkish War of 1919-1923. Hello, I'm Konstantinos Travels. Within the Mudros-Mondros armistice line, the Ottoman census of 1914 and patriarchal one of 1910-1912 gave an Ottoman Greek population of between 1,700,000 to 2,300,000. I accept Fuan Dudar's argument that there were probably about 2 million Ottoman Greeks within the armistice lines. Now, these could be divided into 5 groups. The largest concentration was in Eastern Thrace, excluding the area of Istanbul-Constantinople, where at some parts the Ottoman censi gave strong Ottoman Greek majorities. These people were divided in recent immigrants from Greece and the Balkans seeking better economic conditions, as well as older communities, and were mostly engaged in agriculture, and especially the production of the alcoholic beverage of raki, very popular with Kemal Mustafa Pasha, later Ataturk, and a lot of modern Turks. In the Istanbul-Constantinople region, the Greeks made between 1/5 to 1/3 of the population. They included old families from the time of the Eastern Roman Empire and many new immigrants. They were mainly engaged in trade and banking, the service sector, and small grocery stores. Some of them were extremely powerful and some of them were very weak. People-wise, the largest community in numbers was that of the Aegean littoral of Anatolia. In specific regions, especially around the city of Izmir, Smyrna, they might have constituted a majority of the population. But in the rest of the region, they made sizable minorities ranging from 10 to 30%. They varied in occupation, ranging from great landowners, bankers, and commercial interests to shopkeepers and small plot farmers. A lot of them were recent immigrants that had come in the 19th century from Greece and the Aegean Islands to find better economic conditions. In central Anatolia, in the heart of the Ottoman Empire, there was the Karamanli community. Now, this was an ancient community. They were Greek Orthodox in faith, but they spoke a dialect of Turkish. However, they wrote it with the Greek alphabet. Finally, one of the oldest Greek communities were the Greeks of the Pontus-Karadenizz region, known as Pontic Greeks. While both Greek and Ottoman censi do not give them a majority in the region, they were concentrated in a string of isolated mountain villages nestled high in the Pontus Mountains, where they were engaged in subsistence agriculture and later on the production of tobacco. There was a strong commercial community in the cities of Giresun, Kerasunda, and Trabzon, Trapezunda, which had connections to the wider world. These communities in general had done well during the absolutist rule of Sultan Abdulhamid II. While suffering the lack of political power like everyone else in the empire, they had gained immensely from the opening of the Ottoman economy to the liberal capitalist system. That money brought with it social power, and that social power was expressed with monumental buildings, including a huge amount of schools. For example, the Red School at Fener, known as I Megali Tougenu Scholi or Kimrizi Okul, the Zografio and Zapio schools at the Pera Beyoğlu neighborhood of Istanbul, Constantinople, or grand churches that signified a resurgent confidence of the community, like the monumental Hagia Triada Church at Taksim Square. The heads of these communities were traditionally religious leaders. For example, Metropolitan Chrysanthos in Trabzon, Metropolitan Germanos Karavangelis in Amasya, or Metropolitan Chrysostomos of Smyrna. But with the increased secularization of Greek society, important economic and commercial interests became more important. All of them varied in their approach to relations with the Muslim populations and the Ottoman state. Indeed, the Ottoman Greeks were divided in politics and on how they saw the Megali idea play out. Some factions saw the Megali idea fulfilled by the incorporation of Ottoman Greeks into the Greek state. Others believed in a gradual strengthening of the economic and political power of Ottoman Greeks within the existing political framework of the Ottoman Empire. For example, Patriarch Joachim III, who was Patriarch of Constantinople between 1901 and 1912. Still others believed in the ability of Ottoman Greeks to dominate an Ottoman constitutional and federated state. For example, Athanasios Suliotis Nikolaidis, a Greek guerrilla leader, spy, activist, and a friend of the great Greek nationalist thinker Ioannis Dragoumis. Now, Greek Prime Minister Eleftherios Venizelos considered the economic and physical safety of Ottoman Greeks paramount and necessary for his great reform program in Greece. The goal was to use Ottoman Greek ingenuity and capital to turn Greece into a liberal capitalist Reichsstaat. As long as the Ottoman state did not interfere in the economic activity of Ottoman Greeks and their ability to interact and be politically active in the Greek state, Venizelos considered incorporation a secondary goal to reform within the Ottoman Empire. Indeed, Bulgarian irredentism was considered a more serious threat than Hamidian autocracy, something that fed into what the Greeks called the Macedonian struggle, which was essentially a guerrilla warfare within Ottoman Macedonia. The Ottoman Greeks thus faced the Young Turk revolt, divided and generally lukewarm. The restoration of the 1876 constitution was initially seen as a good thing, opening the space for attaining the Megali idea through political domination of a liberal Ottoman Empire. But the policies of the Committee of Union and Progress that interfered with the educational and economic activities of Ottoman Greeks quickly soured them to loyalty to the new state. Then came the Balkan Wars. And the Balkan Wars were catastrophic for Anatolian Ottoman Greeks. Now, it is true that during the wars, the Ottoman Greeks of Crete, the Western Aegean Islands, and many regions of Macedonia were liberated and incorporated into the Greek state. But a lot of Ottoman Greeks, 2 million, remained in the Ottoman Empire. And for them, the Balkan Wars meant threat. And the threat was caused primarily by the Ittihadist Committee and Union Progress leaders that were fleeing the fall of Ottoman Rumeli and the hundreds of thousands of destitute, terrified Muslim refugees fleeing the Christian armies and Christian guerrilla bands. They also saw the Ottoman Greeks as part and parcel of those who wronged them. The triumvirate ruling the Ottoman Empire since 1913 settled the Muhajirs, refugees, in areas of Ottoman Greek concentration in order to dilute the population. This, of course, led to violent clashes between the locals and the refugees. While the Committee of Union and Progress party system under Talat Pasha pursued an active policy of reducing the economic power of the Ottoman Greeks. CUP stalwarts like Mahmud Celal Bayar, later president of Turkey, organized an economic boycott. This, in conjunction with the violent activities of Ottoman brigands known as Çetes and Efes, and in conjunction with the clashes with refugees, led many Ottoman Greeks to seek succor in Greece. Between 1913 and 1914, the first policy of deportation is pursued by the Committee of Union and Progress. The target is the strong population concentrations of Ottoman Greeks in eastern Thrace. By June 1914, under a pretext of security, close to 100,000 Ottoman Greeks from eastern Thrace have fled to Greece. Between May and July 1914, there was a serious war scare between Greece and Turkey, which led to the extension of the persecution of Ottoman Greeks to the whole of the Aegean coastal area, especially Aydin Vilayet. It became serious enough that Venizelos was willing to consider a voluntary population exchange program with the Committee of Union and Progress, in which the Muslims of Greece, about 500,000, would be exchanged for about 800,000 Ottoman Greeks from Aydin Vilayet. The coming of the First World War and the resistance of Ottoman Greek communities to this policy, both in Greece and the Ottoman Empire, killed this proposal. With the war, the persecution of Ottoman Greeks intensified, and a policy of deportation to the interior began. The Ottoman Greeks of the Gallipoli region were the first to be deported, as they were not considered loyal or secure enough in case the region was attacked, as was the case with the Gallipoli campaign. With the entry of Italy in the war in 1915, the Greeks of the region of Halikarnassos, Bodrum, Menderseh, and the southern area around the Deccanese were also deported into the Aegean littoral, and deportations intensified in Thrace. By 1916, the deportations are now aimed at the Pontic Karadenizh rooms. With the Russian Caucasus campaign and the Armenian armed insurrections in reaction to the onset of the genocidal policies against them used as excuses. Using the security excuse, the Ottomans tried to deport the Greeks of Trabzon. However, they quickly stopped this because the neutral kingdom of Greece, through the Ottoman German allies, threatened action. This was taken out with the entry of Venizelist Greece into the war in 1917, which permitted the Ottoman government to restart the deportations without any fear of insulting German allies. The Pontic Greeks are now deported to central Anatolia. The deportation policy sparks local insurrections, as the male population of the isolated mountain villages of Trabzon and Giresun seek refuge in the high peaks and begin fighting. These groups, through large in number, are never truly organized in a coherent whole pursuing some kind of political goal. They're more correctly understood as local militias or guerrilla bands, and they're mostly fighting an attempt by the Ottoman state to destroy them, headed by Topal Osman Aga, a veteran of the Balkan Wars. With the arrival of Russian troops in Trabzon in 1916, Metropolitan Chrysanthos collaborates with the Russians, but at the same time offers succor to Muslim refugees escaping vengeful Armenians and the depredations of the Cossacks. Indeed, in some cases, Pontic Greek militias clash with Armenian guerrilla groups when Muslim populations considered important for the economic viability of Pontic Greek villages are threatened by those Armenians. By November 1918, the Greeks of the Aegean littoral, the Karadenizh region, eastern Thrace, and Antalya have all been affected by deportations and massacres. Only the Greek population of Istanbul, Constantinople, and the Karamanli Greeks of central Anatolia are spared. The deportees are mostly flouted into central Anatolia, the areas around Kayseri, Caesarea, Sivas, and Ankara, which is different than the Armenians who were mostly sent to die at Deir el-Zor in Syria. Their houses and capital is confiscated, but in many regions local Muslims act as caretakers. Outside of the action of Pontic militias fighting localized village battles, the Ottoman Greeks avoid armed resistance. There's nothing similar to the great Armenian insurrections. Many men are forced into the labor battalions, Amele Tabur, where they die from murder, hunger, and disease. From the 2 million Ottoman Greeks estimated to be in the empire in 1914, about 500,000 have been deported into Asia Minor, with probably half dying due to various reasons, including murder. Another 100,000 to 300,000, depending on the sources, have become refugees in Greece. With the end of the war, the shattered communities begin rebuilding. Under the Mudros Mondros armistice terms, the deportees from central Anatolia are to return back to their homes. So these 500,000, 300,000 remaining Greeks, deportees start making the long, dangerous trek back to their homes. At the same time, the refugees from Greece begin returning to their areas. A lot of the men among these refugees and deportees have become hardened by the experience and filled with hate. Many had been put when they arrived in Greece in regions that had Muslim minorities, and in many of those regions, many of these people had engaged in brigandine and murder campaigns against the local Muslims, sometimes requiring active intervention by the Greek state to stop them. They emulated essentially the actions of the Muslim Rumeli refugees against them. Many of the deportees had become radicalized by their experience, armed and filled with hatred for the society that had persecuted them. Determined to never be ruled by a Muslim state ever again, they were now returning to find their homes given to Muslim refugees from the Balkans and the Caucasus. Those refugees, destitute themselves, had found in this stolen property the succor and help they had been denied in their own harrowing journeys of expulsion and terror. These two groups of desperate people, with the notable exception of the area of Trapezuta, Trebizond, Trabzon, where the strong leadership of Metropolitan Chrysanthos had kept the peace between Muslim and Greek throughout the worst years and days of the war, these two groups of desperate people, Rumeli refugees and Greek refugees and deportees, traumatized by war, massacre and deportation, armed to the teeth, and hungry for vengeance in a political landscape bereft of any legitimate authority, in a country ravaged by war, were now poised to fight to the death over the remnants of the Ottoman Greek legacy. The potential of such an ethnic war will be one of the arguments Venizelos used to justify the expansion of Greek authority into Asia Minor. My sources in this episode include Fouandar Moderne Türkiye Sifresi, the Greek version. Remember, the book exists in French and also in English. Michael Lewin Smith, Ionian Vision, which also exists in Greek, Toramat Sionias, and in Turkish. Sevret Vultu, Late Ottoman Population and its Ethnic Distribution. Paschalis Mikitromilides and Alexandris Alexiadis, Ethnic Survival, Nationalism and Forced Migration. The historical demography of the Greek community of Asia Minor at the close of the Ottoman era. Stefanou, Ioannis Stefanou, Eleftheriou Venizelou, τα κείμενα, volumes 2, 3, and 4. And the work of Dr. Stefanos Katsikas, previously of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and now University of Chicago. So this is where this episode ends. If you want to learn more about the conditions of the Ottoman Empire in World War I, I suggest you watch the Great War series or the Ottomans in the World War I series on YouTube. Konstantinos Travlos, out.